On May 14, 2025, Chris Brown posted, "Free Tory," on his Instagram story, a public show of support for Tory Lanez, who's currently serving time for shooting Megan Thee Stallion. But just a day later, Chris wasn't just speaking out for someone behind bars, he was behind bars himself. Chris had just flown into the UK for the European leg of his 2025 world tour. But instead of heading to rehearsals, he was arrested at the Lowry Hotel in Manchester. Police charged him with grievous bodily harm with intent, one of the most serious charges under UK law. According to prosecutors, this all stems from an incident back in February 2023. Chris was performing in Europe at the time, and after a show in London, he ended up at Tape nightclub. That's where the alleged victim, music producer Amadou Abe Dio, says Chris launched into a violent, unprovoked attack. The claim? That Chris struck him over the head multiple times with a bottle of Don Julio tequila, and once Dio was unconscious, Chris began stomping on him for nearly 30 seconds. The injuries were serious, torn ligaments, head lacerations, and it was all reportedly caught on CCTV. Now, more than a year later, that case has caught up to him. And this isn't just some random controversy. It's part of a much bigger pattern. Because when you take a step back, Chris Brown's story starts to feel all too familiar. Before we proceed, we kindly ask for your support by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Your engagement helps us to grow and continue providing valuable content. Thank you. He was just 16 when the world first saw him. A breakout star with a voice that sounded like heaven and dance moves that felt like magic. Run It hit #1, and suddenly, Chris Brown was the future of R&B. People called him the next Michael Jackson. But that image shattered in 2009. That's when the world found out what happened between him and Rihanna. The photos were everywhere, the bruises, the blood, the story that she had been beaten by the person she loved. Chris was arrested, charged, and sentenced for felony assault. He apologized. He did community service. He went to anger management. But that moment stayed with him, and with us. Since then, things never really settled. He was in and out of court, facing new accusations, violence, threats, drugs, and more. Some lawsuits got dropped, others were settled. His relationship with ex-girlfriend Karrueche Tran ended in a restraining order. There were public outbursts, cancelled appearances, even stints in rehab and jail. In early 2025, Chris filed a $500 million defamation lawsuit over a documentary that painted him as a serial abuser. His team claimed it was all lies. That people were out to get him. That he'd paid for his past mistakes, and the world just wouldn't let him grow. But then came the London arrest, a turning point that once again dragged his name through the mud. Violence seems to follow him like a shadow, always lurking. It's as if he's trapped in a cycle, never learning, repeating the same mistakes no matter how many chances he gets. On May 16, Chris appeared before a magistrate in Manchester. His lawyer argued for bail, saying he wasn't a flight risk. But the judge wasn't having it. She denied bail and ordered Chris to remain in custody until his next hearing on June 13 at Southwark Crown Court in London, a higher court reserved for more serious criminal cases. But in a dramatic twist, just days later, Chris was granted bail by a higher court, set at a staggering $6.7 million. He posted it, walked out of jail, and was fitted with an electronic ankle monitor. Strict travel restrictions were placed on him, and he must report to authorities regularly. The worst part? June 13 isn't just his court date, it's also the same day as a scheduled concert in Frankfurt, Germany. Which means, depending on what the court decides next, not only does that show hang in the balance, but the rest of the tour might be in jeopardy too. And once again, fans are asking, how much of this is the system targeting him, and how much is just who he really is? Some people are still in his corner. They see the music, the performances, the charitable work, the attempts to move on. They believe Chris is misunderstood, that he's trying. Others say it's a cycle, and it keeps repeating because nobody ever really stopped it. That fame has protected him for too long. That the justice system looks the other way when you're famous enough, talented enough, and rich enough to make it all disappear. But now, with Chris freshly out on a $6.7 million bond and facing serious charges, it's harder to ignore. Will the tour be cancelled? Will new evidence come to light? Will Chris plead guilty, or fight it in court? No one knows yet, but one thing is clear. Chris Brown's story isn't just about music. It's about fame, power, pain, and the consequences that keep catching up. Do you think Chris Brown is being unfairly targeted, or is this accountability long overdue?